Hello everyone and welcome to the UKGN Network podcast. I'm Zoidberg, and this week we've once again been teleported back to our youth thanks to the arrival of the long-awaited Sega MegaDrive Mini. With such a beloved library of games, whittling them down to the 42 featured here would have been an unenviable task. There's a nice variety of titles with the expected well-known favourites, but there's an unexpected restraint to the selection. We only get Streets of Rage 2 rather than the whole trilogy, for instance, but that allows for some more obscure inclusions as well. And let's face it, nobody really needed Sonic and Knuckles anyway. Games such as Darius, Alicia Dragoon and Landstalker might not be anyone's first choice, but their appearance here is more than welcome. An extra surprise is that if you switch the console language, you even get to play the Japanese versions of every game, meaning that you don't have to suffer playing Probotector, as with a couple of button presses, Contra Hardcore is available instead. What's most surprising is that it's taken Sega this long to jump on the mini console bandwagon. It's been over 2 years since the arrival of the NES Classic Edition, and since then the SNES, PlayStation Neo Geo and even the Commodore 64 have returned to stores. So what have Sega been doing? As it turns out, they've been biding their time, making fantastic design decisions to ensure that the Mega Drive is the best value mini console so far. The menu is slick and functional, the HD display shows off the fabulous pixel art graphics perfectly, and the unit itself is the perfect replica that you'd want, complete with functioning buttons and volume slider. If you're willing to pay extra, you can even buy mini cartridges and a mini Mega CD to sit underneath it just to complete the illusion. Whether you think this is the best mini console yet depends on which side of the great gaming divide you sit, but whether your affinity lies with Sega or Nintendo, we'd have to say it's a bargain at just £70 for any retro collector. There will always be people who think that one game or another should have been included over some of the ones that have been, but on the whole it does a good job of providing something for everyone. With that in mind, we present our top 5 games that should have been on the Mega Drive Mini. Number 5. Bonanza Brothers. We had some debate in UKGN Towers about whether to include Bonanza Brothers in this top 5, as not all of us like it. However, this was one of the games that made me, as a SNES owner, want a Mega Drive, and that's why it's here. As the titular brothers, Robo and Mobo, the aim is to infiltrate a series of secure locations and steal a number of items out from under the nose of the patrolling guards. What makes it a perfect fit for the Mini is the split-screen 2-player mode, where you can team up with a friend. It's still a joy to play today, mainly thanks to the gameplay that encourages you to behave irresponsibly. Slamming open doors with an unsuspecting guard stood behind it still brings the giggles every time. Number 4. Two Crude Dudes. Set in the year 2010, where apparently everyone dresses like a reject from an 80s B-movie, Two Crude Dudes is an entertaining beat-em-up with an incredibly silly streak running through it. You play as a mercenary who has to battle through screen after screen of assailants, using not only your fists but anything else you can lay your hands on. Rocks, traffic lights, barrels and wrecked cars can all be picked up and hurled at the enemies, even the enemies themselves. Add a second player and it becomes even better, allowing you to pick up and throw your partner as well. It's quite simply one of the most enjoyable 2-player games on the Mega Drive as a result, although it can lead to arguments between the players. Number 3. Rocket Knight Adventures. It's understandable that Konami would want Castlevania and Contra to be included, but for many fans, Rocket Knight Adventures is remembered just as fondly, and for good reason. It's every bit as good as the Sonic games, with some great graphics, toe-tapping music and challenging level design. Learning to make the most of Sparkster's tail slide and rocket jumps are the key to navigating the later levels, and the side-scrolling shoot-'em-up sections break up the action nicely. It was followed by 2 sequels in 1994, one for the Mega Drive and one for the SNES. But since then the character has been reduced to only the occasional cameo appearance in other Konami titles, until an attempted revival in 2010 on Xbox Live Arcade. Did we really need 2 Mickey Mouse platformers on the Mini instead of this? Probably not. Number 2. Micro Machines 2 Turbo Tournament. Our old friend, licensing issues will have prevented Codemasters Classic Multiplayer Racer from being included, and that makes us sad. Micro Machines remains synonymous with the Mega Drive, thanks to the design of the J-Carts, introduced with Micro Machines 2, which allowed an extra 2 joypads to be connected for up to 4 players. After the success of the first game, Turbo Tournament doubled down on the concept, with more players, more cars, more track locations, and improved graphics, to produce a game that's better in every way. We'd hate to think of how many hours of our lives we've spent playing the multiplayer mode alone, and that's why it should have been included. The developers of the most recent game in the series should be forced to play this non-stop until they realise where they went wrong. Number 1. The Lost Vikings. Released in 1993, The Lost Vikings remains one of our most beloved games from the 16-bit era, and it's just as enjoyable today as it was the first day it arrived. It's a platform puzzle game where you must guide 3 Viking heroes, Eric, Balog and Olaf, who have found themselves beamed aboard a spaceship. Each hero has unique abilities, and only by using them together can you pass each level, and some of the puzzles are fiendish but incredibly satisfying to solve, particularly as you near the end of the game. It was developed by Blizzard, when they were still called Silicon and Synapse, and the characters have appeared in other games from them since, like Rock'n'Roll Racing and Heroes of the Storm. We'd have loved to see it included on the Mini, but we'd also settle for an HD remake. Surely it's time for one. Time for a look at the latest game releases with this week's reviews. The Ghost Recon series is one that's reinvented itself more times than I care to remember, going from the slow-paced tactical original, to the gadget-strewn Graw series, to the co-op open world of Wildlands. Breakpoint might just be a reinvention too far, as I can't work out who this game is for. The action is dull, the quests are repetitive, and the storyline cliched and forgettable. There are times when it feels like it's trying to be Just Cause, but with all the fun elements removed. What's most upsetting is that Ghost Recon Wildlands was actually quite good, and all Ubisoft needed to do was give us more of the same with a new map. We'd have been happy with that. Instead, they've bogged it down with too much annoying online rubbish in an attempt to make it more like The Division, and forgotten to make the gameplay in any way enjoyable. In a bad year for AAA releases, this is easily the worst big budget game I've played in a long time, and quite possibly the worst game of the year. Yooka-Laylee was a successful homage to Banjo-Kazooie, from some of the game's original creators, and for the sequel they've set their sights on another rare classic, Donkey Kong Country. Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair is an extremely enjoyable platform game that doesn't take the use of the word impossible lightly. Beneath the bright, colourful appearance lies a game that's tough as they come. The game's final level, the Impossible Lair itself, is actually able to play as soon as you start the game, and you can have a go at any time, with the game keeping track of how many attempts you've had. But the idea is to explore the world, rescue friends, and unlock extra abilities called tonics to help you. The levels have different variants that you can try, and lots of secrets to discover, requiring multiple playthroughs to find them all. And even exploring the overworld has interesting puzzles to solve. Like the original game, this emulates its inspiration right down to its flaws, but it's still hugely enjoyable and well worth playing. In a week where we've already talked about how great The Lost Vikings was, along comes Trine 4, the latest entry in the series heavily inspired by Blizzard's classic. Like that game, you control 3 characters who can be switched between at any time, and have to solve puzzles to progress through the levels. Trine 3 failed in its attempt to get the action to work in 3D, so it's great to see that this goes back to the 2D gameplay that worked for the first 2 titles. It looks fantastic too, with a gorgeous looking fantasy world and a superb use of colour. It even manages to bring the game to newcomers in a way that won't upset long-time fans, by keeping the tutorial levels that introduce each character short and fun. While it's enjoyable to play on your own, it really comes into its own when you can get a couple of friends to join you, whether you're each playing as an individual character in classic mode, or creating mayhem in the chaotic new ultimate mode. However you play it, Trine 4 The Nightmare Prince is an excellent return to form for the series. Hands up who thought that a game based on John Wick would be a bit like Max Payne. We did, and we're glad to be wrong. John Wick Hex is the latest game from Mike Bithell, the creator of Thomas Was Alone and Volume, and it reimagines the action of the film as a turn-based ballet of bullets. Time stops each time you move, allowing you to assess where the next threat is coming from and act accordingly. Balancing the multiple attackers, a limited supply of ammo, and keeping your eye on the timeline is a surprisingly fun challenge, and at the end of each level you're treated to a real-time look at the action as it unfolded. With a great comic book inspired look and voices provided by Ian McShane, Lance Reddick and Troy Baker as the villain Hex, this is quite unlike anything we've played before, in the best possible way. If only all games based on movies had this much thought and invention put into them. Let's turn our attention back to old games now and finish the show with our retro game of the week. Out this week on Nintendo Switch is Burger Time Party, a surprisingly okay update of the Burger Time arcade game, and it put us in the mood for playing the 37-year-old original. For those not familiar, it's a single-screen arcade game where the aim is to make the ingredients for a burger fall to the bottom of the level, while avoiding sentient hot dogs, pickles and eggs. Like its contemporaries Donkey Kong, Amidar and Chucky Egg, it's all about learning the enemy patterns and planning your route to avoid them. And although it looks like a platform game, it's actually more of a Pac-Man style maze game. The game's central character was Peter Pepper, who can be spotted by eagle-eyed viewers in Disney's Wreck-It Ralph. He's in Tapper's Bar if you were wondering. The new game keeps the gameplay virtually identical, but with an up-to-date graphical sheen, and the addition of a co-op mode, but it's more than a little overpriced at £18. And that brings this week's podcast to an end. We hope you enjoyed it. If you've played on the MegaDrive Mini and want to share your thoughts, please let us know in the comments. We'll be back next week with another Sega-themed show celebrating the 20th birthday of the Dreamcast. Make sure you give us a like and subscribe so you don't miss it. You can follow us on social media at UKGaming Network for all sorts of gaming chat and videos. Thanks for watching. See you next week.